Welcome to Defense Diaries. I'm your host, Bob Mata, and this is the Gacy Tapes Season 2, The Search for Additional Victims, with my partner in crime, Bill Dorsch. And tonight we have a very, very special guest that's going to be joining us for what we feel is a fascinating and important interview regarding one of Gacy's victims. And we really believe that this particular interview, and Bill had found Ginny years ago, and really made a pretty amazing connection with, somebody that we'll be talking about in great length in the future in terms of, was Gacy working alone? Did he have accomplices? So it's a fascinating interview, and I think that you guys will really take a lot from it. So without further ado, let me bring on my partner in crime, Bill Dorsch, and our wonderful guest, Ginny. Hey guys.
Hi.
How are you? Ginny, thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Bill, looking good, my man.
Thank you. It's a long walk here from Bulgaria.
So just so you guys know, when I first got on with Ginny backstage, she was complete with a mustache as an homage to Bill Dorsch, and I didn't know she wanted to be recorded. So it's a piece of time that we'll miss, but that I got to enjoy personally. And you guys just have to trust me. It was amazing. She had this great little mustache. She looked like, I couldn't tell who was who. I couldn't tell who was Bill and who wasn't Bill.
I think she might have looked better. And her mustache was better. Let's say her mustache was better than my mustache.
I agree. I agree. Over-groomed it though. It was just too symmetrical.
It was very well groomed.
Yeah, it was a little not human looking.
It was hilarious. I'll say that.
It was funny.
I only did it because when you had asked for the followers to give their input as to whether you should keep your mustache or shave it, and then you went on to shave it, and you did, and you grew it back like within a week or two. My husband was so impressed, and I said to him, I can do that even quicker. And so that was, so I grew, a mustache that is, I'm going to say, could rival Bill's. And
I think it takes Bill's down. I mean, Bill's lucky that I just have a full beard because my mustache crushes.
But you are lucky I didn't have a beard also.
True.
That's true. All right, so Bill, why don't you start digging in with Ginny, and let's get to some brass tacks here.
Well, Bob, you and I have talked about this. In homicide cases, it's always important to connect witnesses or relatives, friends to the victim. You never know what information you're going to get. And you seek them out, but sometimes you don't know everything and everybody. So it's always a great asset when people reach out to you who you weren't aware of before and present to you information that is mind-blowing in some cases and very important to what you're doing. And it works this way. John Mowry, a young man recently out of the Marine Corps, setting up his life with an apartment near Montrose and Cullum area in Chicago, or Western and Cullum area in Chicago, was living there in September of 1977. And at the same time, not too far away, was Ginny and her cousin. Both were very close in age and very great friends and communication with each other almost every day. And not Ginny, but her cousin Maureen had a boyfriend, which happened to be John Mowry, who was living in this first floor apartment by himself for as long as she knew him. And suddenly, let's say this. She was dating him for a while, and because of their closeness, Ginny knew about the relationship. So can you please first, Ginny, explain the relationship you had with your cousin, and then get into how she was dating John Mowry and how you come to know John Mowry?
Sure. Again, my cousin and I were, thick as thieves. We were very close, attached at the hip, so to speak. We, at that time, as teenagers, and this was the summer of '77, we were with each other every day. I don't think there was a day that went by that we weren't together. But even when we were together and we went our separate ways, we still spoke on the phone every day, at 10 times at least. We knew what we were doing. Each of us was doing. And excuse me, it was I'm going to say probably July, maybe June or July of '77, that somebody that I was casually dating, named Steve, called me on a Sunday afternoon and asked if I wanted to see Star Wars. And he said his friend John was with him. Do I have somebody, or do I know of somebody who'd like to double date? And I said, sure, my cousin's here. So that Sunday, we went to see Star Wars. John and my cousin hit it off. They really liked each other right from the get-go. And from that Sunday until he went missing, they spoke every day, saw each other constantly. Which again was the information was something that I was always aware of. If she just got off the phone with John, she'd call and she'd say, oh, I just spoke with John and we're doing this. And, the way young girls share everything. And maybe that was a little over the top for, some people. But as far as my cousin and I are concerned, we shared everything. And all that time, we knew John to be, first of all, such an upstanding person. And I say this because at the time, the people that we knew, young boys, were, just lazy, druggies, just punks, for the lack of a better word.
Shiftless, yeah.
Yeah,
well, he was just out of the Marine Corps. He was just so he was a little older than you too.
He was older, yes. At the time, I was 16, and my cousin was 17, and John would have been 19, and he was again a person of integrity. You could tell just from the fact that he was going to school full time, working full time, very responsible. And the one thing that made him what we call the epitome of a great boyfriend was that when John said he was going to call, he called. We were like, oh my gosh, he's like the best boyfriend you could ever have. And that was John. And he was kind and he was a gentleman. And that is why he really stuck out, obviously for both of us, because I guess I lived vicariously through my cousin when it came to having a decent boyfriend. But anyway.
Wait, are you saying Steve wasn't a decent boyfriend? Steve, if you're watching.
Steve, let me tell you, he claims he doesn't even know who I am. That's what's so funny. When Bill wanted to contact him, because he also became part of this scenario and what happened when John went missing. But no, Steve was not. It was like, I fixed my cousin up. The guy that I was, very, what's the word? I had a huge crush on him. If I had a call once every couple of weeks, it was like, oh, wow, he called. But
who forgets who they saw the first Star Wars with?
Star Wars.
Hurry up. Come on.
A druggie or an alcoholic. I don't know. he wasn't. I shouldn't say that because either that or he just had an accident and hit his head later in life. Because truly, I knew him for several years. Not that we dated that whole time, but we had a lot of contact. It was not, but anyway, now this is going on at least a couple of months now. And so they were truly what we would call, an item, I guess. And so then that brings us, of course, into, September and I don't know if you want me to get into that part yet.
I go to the days just prior to John going missing.
Okay. So now here's the part where, again, this is not something that I saw firsthand or heard firsthand. This was my cousin relaying information to me. So this would be the Wednesday prior to John Mowry being missing. She calls John's house, and the reason I know this is that she called me right away to tell me of this phone call that she found very strange. She called and said, I just called John, and somebody answered the phone, and he was angry. And she said, I don't know who this guy is. He said his name was Mike, and don't ever call here because you woke me up. And so she said, I think I got the wrong number. And what, who is this person? So later on, my cousin talks to John and finds out that this is somebody who he said was staying with him for, I don't know if he said a little while, a few days, just something to the effect of he needed a place until he gets on his feet. And so John allowed him to stay there. So this is a Wednesday. Thursday, there was nothing significant. Friday, my cousin goes to John's apartment Friday night. And I think she even called me that evening after she got home because she was really, her foundation was really rocked by meeting this Mike person again that she spoke to on Wednesday. Mike was there, and John and my cousin, and I think she mentioned a fourth person was there. And while she was there, she heard Mike telling John something about he has to do this right away to John, and said, you need to meet with this guy, quote unquote guy, this weekend because he's going out of town. And why she even told me that, I don't know, but it really stuck, both, of course, in her mind and my mind. And the only other thing that she also said was that when she met him in person, he said, don't ever call and wake me up like you did the other day. And, here, this is John's apartment, and this guy who comes out of nowhere. And the weirdest part about it too was that John never said anything to her about him. It was just her asking, like, who is he and why?
But John was there during
Yes, but I don't think he was there when he confronted her for waking him up. Okay, so that's what I'm saying. He was just just like he almost like bipolar. She said, 1 second he's nice, the next second he's yelling. That's how he was.
Well, how is she supposed to know when this guy's sleeping? Like, how do you know?
That was thank you. And not to mention, why would she even know that there's somebody there.
Right.
None of it made sense. So now Saturday, I believe I was at her house, and she called John. So this is the day after that evening of meeting Mike for the first time. And John answers the phone and he says, I got to go there. I don't know if he said there's been an accident or he said something happened. And she says, okay, yeah, no problem. Hangs up. And so she was obviously something had happened. We come to find out later that what happened is that his dog got hit by a car. And now remember, this is the Saturday right before he goes missing. And that was the very last conversation that she had with John. So
I got a question for you, though.
Yes.
Did John have more than that one dog?
Yes, he had 2 dogs. And we then, knew of the other dog. And that will come when we explain the conversations that we had with this Mike creature. So Sunday, she's at my house, and she said, John hasn't called. And she says, I don't know what to do because this is not like him. And we said, well, and again, this is one of those, ultra sensitive, low self-esteem, because, every boy, says they'll call and never calls, except John wasn't like that. And I remembered what she had told me on Friday about Mike saying to John, you need to meet with this guy this weekend because he's going out of town. And he made it sound like it was very urgent. Virginia, again, my cousin, portrayed, gave me that impression that she sensed urgency in Mike's way of speaking to John. So when I remembered that, I told her that, she goes, oh, that could be, yeah, maybe he went, maybe that's where he is and he doesn't have time to call. And I said, just call. And she said, no, I'll wait another day. So now Sunday night, and she's upset because we didn't hear from John again. Monday comes, and on Monday, she was very, she was feeling, rejected because she couldn't figure out what's going on with John that he wouldn't call. So she calls him and there's no answer. So it was sometime that evening, it was early evening. We said, let's just go walk over there and let's just go, go to the apartment, and maybe, he might be asleep because he was a busy guy working full-time, going to school full-time. And, a lot of times when they were together, he would just fall asleep on the couch. He was so tired. So we decided to take a walk to his apartment. And so from our neighborhood, maybe a 20-minute walk, not something like that. So it was, I'm going to say about 6 p.m. And we ring the doorbell, and this person opens the door, and it's definitely not John. And my cousin recognizes Mike. And the first thing, she says is, Mike, do you know where John is? And he said, no, like why, kind of a thing. And so he says, well, come on in. So we go up the stairs and we go into the apartment and we sit down, and right away, even though we are there inquiring about John, we get the sense that he sees this as a social visit. And he immediately gets himself a beer, asks us if we want a beer. he had a joint. He started smoking that, asked if we wanted, to partake with him. And we're like, no, we just want to find out about John. So he seems very agitated that we wanted to have any conversation about John. So he starts talking about himself. And we're kind of elbowing each other, kicking each other, like, what are we supposed to do? And he says, we guys stop worrying about John. He probably just went away for a couple of days. No big deal. And we're like, okay, but where? And he keeps changing the subject. So somehow in the conversation, he brings up that he had been locked up. And, I didn't want to know where he was locked up or why. I just knew I was not comfortable being there. My cousin was not comfortable being there. We just knew he knew something about John and where he was or why he was missing, because his manners and everything was just off. Everything about him was just off. I want to add one thing that I remember now. His apartment was furnished. Nothing appeared to be missing. His television was there. We were sitting on couches. It didn't appear that, it did not appear as though John had packed up and moved. And I'm going to tell you why after I finish this part. So, again, we're going on with these, we would almost like this back and forth. Okay, but where's John? And, I work for this guy. I mean, he just would spurt out crazy information. When he asked us, so what are you guys doing? You guys back in school, or, what's going on? I'm like, yeah. I work for this guy out of his house, and, he has so much paperwork. You guys need a job, doing clerical work. And we both, my cousin and I, were, yeah, that sounds pretty cool. He says, yeah, he'll probably pay you well. I'll hook you guys up. And so this, like I said, this was this back and forth. We're interested in some of the things he's saying, but at the same time, I don't want to veer off why we were there. And so we, again, do you think that maybe something happened to John? And he said, no, come on. The guy's he's a grown man. He can do whatever he wants. And will you stop asking about him? That was his thing, was like he'd bite your head off if you asked about John. So we would listen to his stories, and he's, after he was going on these rants about this great job that he has, we asked him what he did. And instead of telling us about a job that working for this man out of his home, which he started to kind of, try to intrigue us with, he tells us he drives a cab. Okay. So we're like, oh, okay. So you have two jobs. And he says, well, I do both. Yeah. And when, now mind you, he's been drinking and he's been smoking this whole time. So we're starting to see that he's loosening up a bit. And he says, yeah, you should see some of the places. And they're like, yeah, okay. And then just out of the blue. And I don't remember if it was these places, this place, this house, but something about a location. Okay, he made it very clear. There is a location where there are dead bodies that nobody knows about, not even the police. And as soon as he said that, of course, my cousin and I kicked each other and we're like, we got to get out of here. This guy is just, I know he's just talking crazy, but we're not going to get any information from him about John. And we're trying to leave, but he continues. He asks us if we were Italian, and we said yes, we're Italian. And he said he was Italian, and I said, you don't look Italian. He goes, Rossi. My last name is Rossi. I'm Italian. Okay. And so I was like, okay. So now I'm trying to remember any other very significant things about that evening. All I can tell you is that what we got out of that encounter that night, Monday, after John has not spoken with my cousin for 2 days, all we got is that this person has a job where he works for someone out of his home. He has a cab. He doesn't seem to care where John is and is annoyed that we care about John. Now it's getting late, and we thought we better get going. I don't know why, but we accepted an offer of a ride home from him. And this was very stupid on our parts, but obviously something came out of it. He takes us to his car, which is a gutted out cab. And my cousin and I, we both sat in the back, and we were like, how does he drive this for a living? You could tell that this was not a for hire kind of cab. There was no meter. It was just a truly gutted out cab. And I still remember very clearly the type of cab. It was, one of those, I don't even know what the make would be, but it was not one of those round, like the yellow cabs. It was one of like American Standard. Do you remember American cabs? They were long. They reminded me like of an old Chevy kind of a car. Mm-hmm. That's what he was driving.
Let me ask you, Ginny, did that vehicle have like the markings of a cab like on the outside? Did it appear to be a cab on the outside?
It was definite. You knew it was. You knew it was a cab because even it was. You could tell that a lot of things were either rubbed off or taken off, but absolutely there were things about it that you recognized as being a cab. But when we got inside, we could see that it was not a car. Okay, you could see where there would have been a space for the
meter.
The meter, exactly. Mm-hmm. And it still had I don't know if the like the radio kind of there were some things. Yes, there were some things indicative of it being or having been used in the past. I could care less. It wasn't, but I remember that very well. And so does my cousin. He drove us home going to be like 90 miles an hour, and I didn't want him to drop us off by our homes. So I told him to drop us off about 3 blocks at a corner away, but he had to actually put on the brakes 3 blocks prior to that to get us to that corner because he was going that fast. So we, when we got out of that car, we were obviously, we have no answers, and now we have a lot more questions, and we're like, now what do we do? But the one thing that we had in common was the thought that this guy is the only answer to John's whereabouts. There's nobody else that's going to know, because where did he come from? Because that's all I kept asking my cousin. How did this guy just show up out of the blue? He's living in his apartment, and now John is gone. it didn't, there was nothing that made sense about it. And John was a level-headed guy. He wouldn't be someone who would just take off. And about a week later, Steve had called and said, I think your cousin knows where he is, because that is not like John. So that was, and he called me. But anyway, so now Tuesday comes along, and we're not satisfied, and we're really wanting to know, how are we going to find out anything? Because it's not like we can call the police and say, hey, there's this guy that lives in my cousin's boyfriend's apartment, and he's not there. There was just nothing about it that you could really say a 19-year-old went somewhere for a couple of days and the police are going to think you're nuts. So that Tuesday, I don't remember if that was the day. Oh no, that was the day. He calls my cousin because he found her phone number in a dresser drawer of John's. And he calls her, and all of a sudden, his attitude changes, and he calls and says, I'm calling to see if you heard from John. And she's like, oh, now you care? And he goes, well, yeah, I just wanted to ask if you heard anything. Plus, his employer called, and they're looking for him. And so at the same time, he says, oh, by the way, do you guys want John's other dog? And so, of course, she calls me, and now we're like, all of a sudden, it's gone from, he just went away for a couple of days, why do you guys even care? And to, do you know where he is? Have you heard from him? And by the way, do you want his dog? If somebody's coming back and your friend lets you stay at their apartment, I don't think you're going to be giving away their dog. Okay. So now we're alarmed. Okay. And we felt now we might need to call the police. But again, why? Because some guy is living where her boyfriend could have left for a few days, and he wanted to know if we wanted the dog. We went back and forth with this. So on Wednesday, we call him, and now we're at my house. And in knowing his attitude and how he kind of gets upset when we ask about John, I started the conversation off with him saying, hey, Mike, you were talking about jobs for my cousin and myself, and we'd like to know more about that. And he said, at the right time. And I'm like, what do you mean at the right time? What is the job? He says, I'll tell you about it when you guys come over. And we both, I said to my cousin, he wants us to come over, and I'm going, no. And he says, you know what? I'll tell you what. Come over. I'll make a steak dinner, and then I'll tell you about the job. And of course, I wanted no part in going over to his house or the house that he took over. And so I don't remember how that conversation was left. We did not say no to him. We just left it as like, oh, well, we'll let you know. The next day, we talked to him on the phone. And this was a back and forth with my cousin and him, and then I got on the phone with him. But what happened on that conversation was that now we mentioned, I think we should call the police. And he said, look, don't call the police. You do know that John's sister was killed, right? This would really hurt his family. Don't make them worry. Okay. And then all of a sudden he's a nice guy. And so now my cousin gets back on the phone with him, and she says, I am definitely calling the police. and he says, I'm out of here. And that was the last time we spoke to him. We never went back. Now, okay, this was, again, 1977. And so this was the Thursday following the date that John would have gone missing, the last time being that he was seen leaving his mother's home that Sunday. And so now what happens is a year, and was it a year and a half goes by?
So your cousin has no contact, and you have no contact with him from that time when he said,
From
"I'm
that,
out of
that
here"?
was it. And I'm out of here. He hung up, and that was it. And so that it was, we were kind of left with our mouths hanging open, because deep down we knew something was wrong, and yet we didn't know what to do about it. Also, at that time, because John lived on his own, my cousin did not have contact or knew his family, because there was, I don't even know if she had ever met his mother. But so it wasn't something where she even had John's mother's number to even ask if she knew anything. So we kind of went, for a little while, always wondering what ever happened. I don't know if we ever went back to the apartment, but if we did, obviously there would be, nobody there. We walked past there many times because that was still not far from our neighborhood. But when the discovery of bodies the next year, and Gacy then was, in the picture, even then, not knowing that John was a victim, my cousin even said, could he have been a victim? And we're like, no, he doesn't live in that area, and what would he be doing in that, by Gacy's house? My cousin, not that cousin, different cousin, and my aunt lived a block away from him. They knew him, but it wasn't. We kind of just blew that off. But I get a call from my cousin, just turn on the news. And so we're both watching the news. And this was when John was identified as one of the victims. I said, get over here right now. She runs over, and because she lived maybe 3 blocks away, and we're in my mom's kitchen, and we looked at each other. Exactly at the same time, we went, Mike. I mean, it all fits now. Okay. Now we need to tell the police. I remember this phone call so vividly. The kitchen with the fluorescent light and the big green box phone on the wall. And I picked it up, and I literally, I don't know if I dialed the sheriff's department. I don't remember, but I looked up something that would not have been like, a 911 kind of a call. And we kept getting connected to different, numbers. And finally, I got someone who claims that they were the ones who wanted information from anyone about Gacy. Right. So I go on to talk to this person. I didn't get a name. I don't remember anything other than telling this deputy, or whatever he was, that my cousin's boyfriend was John Mowry, went missing in September of 77, was just now identified as one of Gacy's victims. And we have some information that we feel is very pertinent to what happened to him. And I went on to give this information about Mike, about him moving into the apartment 4 days prior to John's going missing. And of course, all of the other things, such as him working for somebody out of their home and offering us jobs and everything we could think of. They seemed to be interested, took our information, and said, "We will call you to get more information." So when I hung up, I had the sense that, okay, someone's going to do something about this, because come on, how in the world can you not put that together with John missing? And excuse me. So of course we don't hear anything. And weeks go by, months go by, and it kind of, leaves your mind. And then, of course, we're still following the case, and there's nothing that has anything to do with accomplices. There's nothing, we personally didn't know that there was somebody that they knew that was named Mike Rossi. That's what made it.
Let me ask you a question.
Mhm.
Now, some time passed since you met this Mike at the apartment when John was missing.
Right.
And you reported him missing, but you told the police about Mike Rossi. I mean, remembering the first name might have been easier, but why did you remember the last name?
Well, the Rossi was because I made a joke of his name because of his overwhelming personality. Bossy Rossi was what came to me, and that's what I would tell my cousin. And so it just was, that's who he was. And that
It was easy because of the rhyming.
Right.
Easy. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So time goes on now. He's been identified. The family's notified. He's buried, and you girls go on with your lives.
Correct.
Right. Well, we're talking 1970, 80s, arrested in December. So now we're going many years past that now.
Yeah.
You're not knowing anything about what could have happened to John. And
Correct.
Suddenly, in around 2011, I think it was, or 2012, you called me.
2012. My cousin had called me to say that WGN was doing a piece on accomplices. And I was like, oh my gosh, if they do, that's amazing. Absolutely amazing. And so we watched it. And that was when Becker and Stevenson were on. Mm-hmm. And they were not talking about the Mowry case. They were talking about others. And they made the point that it would have been difficult for a few of the victims to have been murdered by Gacy when there was impeccable records that showed that he was not in town at the time that some of these were killed. So there was a lot of things like that. And they were asking for people to come forward with any information. I said, oh my gosh, we got to call them. But in the meantime, I think it was right. I'm going to say within a month before or after this, I had watched something on the news. I don't know why this even made the headlines, but they mentioned that the lead detective for the Des Plaines PD in the Gacy case, Rafael Tovar, has retired. And I thought, wow, that's a really strange, that's a strange thing to put on the news, but okay. I'd like to speak to this person. So I knew that no one is going to just hand a phone over to somebody or give me his number. So I spoke to one of the detectives, and I told them that I know that he was the one who dealt with Gacy and during the initial arrest, and I wanted to give him some information or ask him about Mike Rossi. And I gave him my number. I said, please, if you can forward this to him, I would really like to talk to him. He called me the next day. And he said, the first thing he said to me is, boy, do I wish that I could have held him longer. He said, I held Rossi for 72 hours. I couldn't hold him legally any longer. I know Rossi was involved. And what you are telling me makes me realize even more so. But there was nothing we could do then. And I don't know if he said that there's really not a whole lot at this point, but I just left it at that. And I could tell he was very frustrated and was for a long time. So now comes the situation where I'm going to contact Becker and Stevenson, and I called them, and they were like, whoa, wait a minute. This is what you're telling us is really, really significant. You're saying that the person who lived with John prior to him missing told you about dead bodies. I said, yes, that's one of the things I'll never forget. That was one of the scariest people as far as I'm concerned. And whether he was out of his mind, or drunk or whatever, at that time, that's how we took it. But after the murders being exposed and all these bodies, what else could he have been talking about? And that to me was just, I have no words. And so then that's how he got me in touch with Bill. And so I then spoke with Bill and gave him all the same information. And at that time, I think John Mowry's brother Robert was still alive. And Bill, you gave us his information, and this is where this story just keeps building, because now that we were able to speak to Robert Mowry, we were then finding out the different accounts of people who had contact with Mike Rossi in John's apartment that week. First, it was Steve, my quote unquote boyfriend, my cousin and myself, and then Robert Mowry and his mother. So during the time that we were trying to figure things out, Steve calls quite a few times saying, I think your cousin knows where he is. And I'm telling you, my cousin is crying, okay? She doesn't know where he is. And then he said, he comes to tell us, he goes, come to think of it, I remember that weekend, Mike, the one with, staying in John's apartment, ran to Steve's apartment and said, you got to come with me. Something happened to John. Okay, this is the weekend he goes missing. And he actually makes him go back to the apartment, and he says, look, his keys and his groceries are on the table. The door was left open. Something happened to John. Okay, this is the same Mike Rossi who 2 days later or a day later tells my cousin and myself, oh, you guys are worrying about nothing. Okay, so now we've got Steve's account, we've got what we went through with Mike, but the one that really did it for me, of course, was back in 2012 when we made contact with John's older brother, Robert, who's since passed away. We spoke a lot, and I'm so glad we got to get to know Robert. But he said that week when John went missing, they, meaning him and his mom, went to John's apartment and they met Mike. They also didn't know anything about this Mike. And when they spoke to him, they're in the apartment. The apartment is cleared out. No couches, no television. And all of a sudden now, Mike's telling them, yeah, John just packed up all his stuff and he wanted to move out. And that just is so sad for me because we didn't know each other at the time, none of us. But
let me ask you, Ginny, how did Steve know Mike? Was he friends with John first or with Mike?
Okay, I don't really know. I think that it was probably, they might have been looking to buy weed in the uptown area. And the only thing I know is that John went to school at Truman, which is right off of Wilson and Sheridan, that area.
Right.
And I know that area was where Gacy would be. And the only thing is, I'm just speculating. But as far as the relationship and how they all knew each other, I think it was more of a party situation. They might have met him there. I really have no idea. According to Steve, when I spoke to him, 10 years ago or whatever it was, he said that they weren't really close with him. It was just somebody they knew. What that means, I don't know. And the same thing with Steve and John. He said, John and I were really not as close as John's brother was with Steve, but somehow they all were connected for that short period of time.
Well, why did Mike Rossi want Steve to go back to the apartment?
That was, according to Steve, he was like, he was frantic. He was like, you gotta, he literally said, you gotta come with me. Something happened to John. So Steve goes back with him because he thinks, we gotta go help, John. And obviously now I'm sure Steve gets the same notion that we did, is that this was like somewhat of a setup to like look, John's not here. I didn't have anything to do with this. Or that's the only thing that I'm thinking after the fact, because I wasn't aware of that, happening until much later.
Well, I also talked to Steve many years later.
Right.
After I talked to you girls. And what Steve told me was that he was introduced, he was friends with John, and through John, that's how he met Rossi. And he perhaps in a very short period of days saw Rossi and John a couple times. All right.
Okay.
And he says to me that one day that, like you were just saying, Rossi suddenly appears at his house and tells him, you got to come with me. I think something might have happened to John.
Right.
So he returns to the apartment with Mike Rossi. Right. And he says that the door was open to the apartment. They went inside and Rossi's going, oh, look, there's his keys and there's his groceries. Right. And I don't know what's going on. He's not here. And he said to me, I asked him, well, what did you do next? He says, well, I said, well, if you don't know where he is, maybe his parents know where he is. Let's call his parents, because he knew the family. Right. And Rossi said to him, hey, man, don't do that. If you're going to do that, I'm out of here. And he says Rossi left him there and he walked away from the apartment. He never saw him again. Yeah,
I think, and talking to Steve about 10 years ago, he also said that he really didn't know Mike well at all, and that he doesn't even know how they all just kind of got together. Like you said, that was it was kind of a strange thing for, because the way Steve made it sound was that he said that Rossi ran to his house and he was just like frantic. He said, you gotta come with me. I think something's happened to John. And of course, Steve was, yeah.
I want to ask you now. I know you said you called either Chicago or the Cook County Sheriff's Department when John's body was identified.
Yes.
But they did nothing. They didn't come to you. Nobody asked you any questions, this and that, and everything else. But now in 2012, many years later, when I'm in the news talking about Rossi, and you contacted me, and nobody really knew I was talking to you.
Correct.
I don't think, but they knew I was involved in the investigation and things like that. Did you get a response or inquiry, or did you call the sheriff's department and ask to talk to somebody?
I believe the way that went, you, from what I understand, I think that you had been in contact with DART's office, or maybe it was Becker and Stevenson who
I was the one
okay.
doing contacting.
Okay, so that was, I believe, how the detective working for DART then did contact me and my cousin, because as a matter of fact, I remember you saying that somebody from the sheriff's department was going to contact us, and you told us that this was going to be a Detective Russell, which, if you'd like, I will go on with that information.
Yeah, please
because
do.
That was absolutely I felt like I was the criminal in this situation. My cousin also was interviewed by him. I needed to tell the story in a chronological way. I didn't want him to ask yes and no questions because he would not be able to get the gist of what really happened. And he was angry because when I started out from the Friday evening when my cousin was at John's apartment and she overhears the conversation about meeting a guy. And right away, Russell says, no. I don't want third-party information. I said, I do understand that. And I will give you firsthand accounts of most things. I said, but I need you to know this because once you hear how I am going to put it together for you, then you can ask me anything you want in any format, and I will be more than happy. And he was like, oh yeah, okay, you be the detective then. I mean, he was not treating me like somebody who had information that could be of benefit to a case that is obviously not completely solved. Okay. I gave him as much information, and he was yeah, not he was just kind of humoring me. And then I got to the part about us being driven home in the gutted out taxi cab. And boy, did he put on the brakes. And he was like, wait. I need to hear about this cab that you were driven home in. And so I went, okay. And I really didn't think that I was even going to give him this information, but I just, went on and on because I don't know if you're aware, I tend to talk a lot. so because if there's information, you're going to get it. But anyway, he was extremely interested in this account with the cab. I didn't know why, and I didn't find out until you called me to tell me, because you then called me. I don't know if it was the same day, but like very shortly afterwards, you called and said they believe you. And I said, why? He goes, the cab. You mentioned the cab. And I said, and I never knew any of the information about Vito Marzullo and his relationship to Rossi. None of that was anything that I would have ever known. But you informed me that Vito Marzullo, who obviously is or was high up there in power as far as dirty dealings or whatever, was the grandfather to Mike Rossi, and he was in charge of licensing of cabs. So this was significant. And when you told me that, I was like, oh yeah, well, I guess that would make sense. Yeah, because there's no way that I could have made up a story that involved a cab that is gutted out with Mike Rossi, who has a grandfather who can give him this, gutted out cab. So that's another one that is just,
Okay. Well, I got to tell you, folks, Bob and all you listeners, that what you heard from Ginny is backed up by what you're going to hear later from her cousin. You have two young girls who have a direct connection to the victim, John Mowry, and to the suspected accomplice of John Gacy, being Michael Rossi. And the urgency of Rossi trying to get John over to a location because the person is going out of town is significant too, because if the person had went out of town already, we know, Bob and I know, that not all the victims were killed in the same way. Some were strangled with a rope, and others were suffocated by cloths being placed deep into their throats. And I'm sorry, Ginny, something I should not maybe have shared with you. But without your help and the help of your cousin, we would not be able to place Rossi into this picture with a victim of John Gacy. So I thank you so much for what you've done.
Well,
yeah, Ginny, it's brave of you. And anybody who listens to that story that doesn't understand that clearly Rossi was grooming John to bring to Gacy.
right.
And ultimately, that's clearly what happened. I mean, just imagine, had they done some kind of investigation, John Mowry's furniture went somewhere. It didn't vanish into thin air.
Right.
Much like Mike Rossi was driving around in John Zick's car for 2 years.
Yes.
I got one other thing that I remember you told me, Ginny. Yeah, I'm sorry, Bob. I wanted to get this in there. When Detective Russell was at your house, we
did it on the phone.
On the phone.
Yes.
You told him he already knew about or was suspicious about Rossi.
Yes.
And he told you he went to talk to Rossi, didn't he?
He said he was going to, and then we subsequently found out that he went there, and and he said that the wife answered the door and said that Mike was too depressed, and he was in bed. He was too depressed to come to the door. And Detective Russell said, "Okay, bye."
Wow.
That was their following up on what we, again, they were humoring us because this was obviously not something that they really wanted to do. I always felt, of course, that the reason that Tom Dart made a big to-do about people coming forth with DNA to identify bodies that hadn't been positively ID'd was because of what Bill had done to get the body that was given to Sherry Marino exhumed. And because now these bodies are going to be exhumed, hey, let's get a pat on our backs, take the credit, and say, bring him forward. We're opening up this case. And the truth of the matter is, that was not what was happening. That was because Bill, working with Becker and Stevenson, were trying to help Sherry Marino get the truth about her son. And I am going to say this as the driving force for me. And my motivation, especially in these last 3 years, has been the thought of Sherry Marino to this day not knowing about her son. I lost my son 3 years ago, my firstborn son. I know what happened to him, and it's beyond words. But for Sherry Marino to not have her son, knowing something has happened, and not know what I hate to use the word closure because it's not that, but you can process something in your mind a lot better. And for Sherry Marino and any other family who has a loved one who is missing, this is why the truth has to come out. Because whether Mike Rossi can put together anything that will help with a dig at Miami and Elston, or any of the information about the Rainbow skating rink, there's got to be something, because you can't let this many people who still don't know what happened to their missing loved ones live another minute not knowing. That's where I'm at.
Okay. Thank you very much, Jenny, for all your
Thank you, Ginny.
help.
You're
God
amazing.
bless
You're
Thank you.
amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And thank you for letting me. It's kind of a cleansing feeling to be able to get that out, holding in these thoughts and the constant. It was traumatizing as a teenager for my cousin and I, and then even more so traumatizing to feel that we had listening ears, only to have it thrown back in our faces. It's this up and down thing that it's just wrong.
It is
So-
wrong.
We agree completely.
Yeah. So
Well,
thank you for giving me the opportunity.
no, we thank you completely. And you're a perfect example of why we're trying to do what we're trying to do. So it's for us. You're a shining beacon as to why Bill and I are going to see this thing through. So thank you so much for coming on and sharing that with us, because to me, it's so significant. I just, I mean, look,
Well,
there's no statute of limitations on murder. So-
just like I jokingly have said to Bill in the past that my first few encounters with the powers that be, just the very simple connections, and this is just one iota of connections. I said these people have to have mashed potatoes for brains, not to make the connection. But that wasn't the problem. It's not that the connection wasn't made. It's just the doing of what is right was not done.
Yeah.
That's all. They made the connections.
Willful blindness.
Yeah.
All right, y'all. Thank you for joining us, and stay tuned. We will have none other than Ginny's cousin on to get her version of what she remembers, which I'm sure is going to be very, very similar to her cousin's, with some probably different insights because we're all different as individuals. But I think it'll be enlightening, just like this was. So, Ginny, you're amazing. Thank you so much. You're brave. Thank you for coming on with us and sharing, because I know it's a lot, and it's
Yeah, I didn't realize it just doesn't ever. I just don't like to have the thought about any of it in my mind, which is why, and again, Bill, you did not do wrong in giving the facts of things. Those are the things I have to keep out of my mind. But as far as if there's a way that something can be done with which will open up an investigation, whatever, so that they're the families, because that's all I have in my mind. If this affected myself and my cousin, I can't even imagine the families, and that's what I've got in my mind. So, yeah.
Yep.
Anyway, thank you.
Thank you. All right, y'all. We'll
Good
talk to you
night,
later.
everyone.